Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, welcome to episode 324 of She Said, She Said Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Cox Kaplan, and I am really thrilled to have you joining us today. So a question for you, friend. Have you ever felt like you're just constantly torn between your career ambitions and maybe your role as a mother or a caretaker? Well, I think it's sort of an obvious question. Most likely you have felt this, and it can leave you feeling like you're stuck in an impossible tug-of-war where excelling in one of those areas likely means sacrificing in the other. Well, my guest today calls this the ambition paradox, and she's here to help us really rethink everything we thought we knew about ambition, especially as it relates to motherhood and caretaking. And I think you're going to love this conversation. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Anne Welsh to the podcast. Anne is a Harvard-trained psychologist, a career coach, and the mother of 4 teenagers. And she has spent much of her career researching this fascinating intersection between ambition and motherhood. And I think you'll find her approach to really rethinking ambition so illuminating. I know I did. I had so many thoughts after recording this conversation with Anne, and I'm really excited to share it with you. A couple of other things, though. We talk about the importance of thoughtfully repackaging the incredible leadership skills that are gained through motherhood and caretaking, something that I think is oftentimes overlooked. And we also talk about the impact of small, even subtle 1-degree shifts in our mindset and how that can have a really big impact on the way that we go about balancing the many roles of motherhood and career. Friend, whatever role that you may find yourself juggling today, I think you're going to find Anne's approach really innovative and hopefully very liberating. Most of all, I'd love to know what you think, so be sure to send your feedback once you have a chance to listen. For now, though, here is episode 324 with Dr. Anne Welsh. Enjoy. Anne, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. When I ran across your bio and the work that you have been doing, I knew it would be the perfect fit for this audience and their topics that I am particularly fascinated with as a working mom and have been for a number of years now. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Again, it's stuff I love talking about as well, and I'm really honored to be a guest with here.
So let's jump in. I want to kick us off with this topic that really just jumped out and grabbed me, got my attention. This idea of the identity ambition paradox that you talk about. And by the way, I will say Anne has a book coming out, which I'm really excited about. We won't get that until probably 2026. But she's in the process. She has a publisher, so that's coming too, and she's going to talk more about this. But this will give folks a little sneak peek into some of the things that she's been working on.
Yeah, so, I've been in practice as a psychologist for a long time now, and my work is all on motherhood and working mothers. And I found my clients kind of all were struggling with the same thing. And it was that inevitable pull of your heart being in two places at once, right? And I started to think of it as this paradox, right? So what is a paradox? A paradox is a self-contradictory statement, right? It feels illogical. You essentially can't, you get stuck in both sides. And so the ambition paradox that I talk about for working motherhood is when a woman wants to be an incredible mother and wants to achieve big professional goals and feels like it is impossible
Right.
to do both, right? It's that feeling of being really trapped or stuck between like a rock and a hard place, and you just feel like the whole thing is a futile effort. Right? And it's this feeling of when I'm focusing on my career, I'm not present for my kids. If I give more of myself to my kids, I'm not reaching my quote full potential at work. And there's this feeling of I
Right.
can't win. And what happens is to solve it, a lot of us end up doubling down on what we should be doing, right? We seek a magic hack. If I just get up at 4 a.m, that will be the tool. And in that process, we just get farther detached from ourselves and what we actually want and what we actually need and what we really value. And it leaves us feeling really
Yeah.
unhappy.
Okay, Anne, all of that resonates so deeply, certainly with me, and my guess is with everyone listening. Let's talk about what we do about that. Maybe where do we start? Not working is not an option for, I would say, the vast number of moms. So let's talk about maybe how we get a better handle on this and the stress that's associated with all of it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think at first I would just want to address that point you made, like not working isn't
Mm.
always an option. And it's not always the option that women want, right? I think that is given to us as the solution. Dial back, work less, then you won't feel so overwhelmed. And that's not
Mm.
great advice, right? For many of us, like you said, economically, it's not always an option. But again, we may want to work or may want to have meaningful work, and we want to figure out a way to do both, and we should be allowed to do that. So, what is what is the process of doing that? Well, the process is to get more clear on what you're reaching for outside of what everybody else tells you you
Mm.
should want, right? So part of the problem is we see this version of perfect motherhood on Instagram, or in our friends, the small amounts that we see, we get little bits and pieces of all of these versions of motherhood, and we think we have to be all of those things. And we see the same thing at work, and we try to keep them separate, and we go after these tiny pieces of perfection trying to get a big picture, and we stop asking ourselves, do I
Mm.
want it? Right? Women are socialized from day one to enter this world and stop asking, what do I want? Right? We're told to be small. We're told to take up less space. We're told to serve other people. Right? Like we're kind of part of the water we swim in as women is being told to be people pleasers and to take care of everybody else's first needs first. Layer on that motherhood, which has that same martyr messaging, and we just don't even know what we want. So we have to start by labeling all that other stuff as external and tuning into what do you want? What's going to make you happy or you fulfilled? And maybe there are bits and pieces of the stuff you've been going after that are kind of resonate with you, but a lot of it
Hmm.
probably doesn't, right? A lot of it is stuff you've just been chasing because someone else told you you should, or that's what a good mom does, or that's what a top tier leader does. And once we can start getting in tune with our values, feeling aligned with what we want and what we need, then you get this positive feedback loop, right? Where you start feeling better, you start putting your time and energy into the things that actually serve you, and you then have more to give and can actually show up at work and motherhood in a way that fits for you.
Right. Okay, let's dial that back a little bit and go a bit deeper and maybe
Yeah.
walk through the process that you go through to help a person get there, because I can only imagine somebody listening who maybe is really in the muck and really struggling with all of this saying, I don't have time to get a glass of water and go to the bathroom, much less like peel back what my values are and what I want. So where does she start, Anne?
Yeah, I think so. Let me first address that piece of I don't have the time, right?
Mm.
So I think a lot of us think this needs to be some sort of dramatic um, undertaking, but really it's a series of teeny tiny steps, right? I talk about a 1 degree shift a lot. So my my son is in Boy Scouts and they do like orienteering with a compass, and they had to go in the woods and like get from point A to point B, and they were just told a compass point, right? And when you're going like 100 or 200 feet, if you hit 11 degrees instead of 10 degrees, you're going to land at the same tree. You're fine, right? But if you're on an airplane, right, going across the world,
Right.
that 1 degree shift makes a huge difference, right? There is compounding distance
Sure.
as you go further and further and further away. And so that's what I want people to think about, is that 1 degree shift that makes a huge, huge difference. And so sometimes that 1 degree shift is literally starting by asking yourself what you want for dinner. Right? I mean, literally, how many people struggle with that question? Maybe it's not even what do I want for dinner? Maybe it's what do I not want for dinner? Maybe that's all you can access right now. And that's something. That is a step, right? So maybe your kids are clamoring for pizza and it's Friday night and you're tired and you're like, I don't want pizza. Okay, pick something else. Don't get pizza just because that's what your kids want. Try something else. But go with that little kernel, that little teeny tiny voice inside that says, hey, there might be something else here. And, so knowing that, what's the bigger process? I talk about it, as silly as this analogy sounds, kind of like a closet clean out, right? If you're cleaning out your closet, right? What do you do if you're really trying to do it thoroughly? You take everything out of the closet.
Right.
You lay it all out on the bed. And you look at it and you try it on and you see if it fits, right? And so we're going to do that with all of the things we're chasing. That's what Aunt Susan told me I wanted. Oh, that's what that my grad school advisor said I was supposed to do. Oh, that's my mom. I definitely don't want that. Whatever it is, right? But label, what is it? Where did it come from? And does it actually fit? And don't pick back up anything. Like, don't put anything else in the closet that wasn't yours, that doesn't fit. Get rid of it. What does that getting rid of it look like? Every time those like nagging thoughts show up, you label it, right? So you have that voice of like, oh, your kitchen is messy. Nobody else has a kitchen like this. Then you say, okay, but is that actually important to me that it's super organized? No, that's my mom's voice. So, okay, mom, I don't need to listen to that, and I put it aside. And we retrain our brain circuitry the more that we are able to do that, and eventually can just tune into what we want and what works for us. It's a process over time, though, for sure.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That resonates so deeply with me. I talk a lot about cleaning out my closet, or maybe the lack of ability to do so, and also the identity that's associated with all the things in your closet. And part of what sometimes can make cleaning out your closet so difficult is the identity that you attach to that. And that's kind of what you're getting at, even though you're talking more psychologically.
Right.
So I'd love for you to maybe go a little deeper with that and talk a bit more about the process of knowing when something doesn't fit. And I'm not talking about the closet necessarily, although it might apply to that too, but I'm talking about those particular roles that you just mentioned. How do we know if it doesn't fit? You mentioned your mom's view of what you should be doing, or your Aunt Susan's view of what you should be doing. But how do you know when it doesn't fit you? Because sometimes we're so conditioned to hear those other voices, it can be really difficult to separate, okay, is that me or is that someone else? So how do you go through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, at a big picture level, because you're miserable, right? And quite frankly, that's a lot of times what happens when people come into my office. They're saying, hey, I did it. I got the kids I wanted. I have this job that I thought I wanted, and I am so unhappy all the time, or I'm numb and none of it's actually done anything for me. So like, that's where a lot of times we end up. And then we say, okay, this is probably not working. Let's see. But usually predating that, there were signs of it feeling uncomfortable. And I think the clothes continue to be a really good analogy. Like let's say I'm a jeans and t-shirts kind of gal, right? Like that's my, maybe a sweater because I live in New England, but like comfortable basics, right? And if I were to go out into my life and wear like a gala gown, I would feel uncomfortable all day long. It might even fit me, but I'd be like tugging at it and pulling at it. I wouldn't feel good. And that's the same kind of data that we've kind of numbed ourselves to in terms of these identity pieces. So checking in, like, how does this feel in my body? How do I feel signing on my computer for this work assignment? Do I enjoy it? Am I Is there part of it that's interesting, part of it that's not, right? The answer could be multiple things. The other thing that I think is really hard here that people can tune into is that what we want can change. And that's not a
Oh,
bad thing, right? Like, again,
yeah.
with the closet, the things I wore in my 20s, maybe not what I want to wear in my 40s. And that's fine, right? That's a totally normal, expected development. Guess what? That happens with pieces of our identity too, right? Like, what I wanted for my career in my 20s is not what I have now. And I'm happy with what I have now. It doesn't mean I did anything wrong. It's growth, it's development, it's change. And that happens throughout the entire lifespan.
Yeah, you hit on something that I have thought about so much because when I left my corporate job, so I worked to the point where I got what was my dream job, and for a number of years, it was absolutely my dream job. I loved it. I loved the people that I worked with, all the things. Right? I didn't stop loving the people that I worked with, but the role changed, the job changed, the
Mhm.
organization changed. Like all those things were changing simultaneously, as were the people. The people were shuffling, new people as these things happen, right? What I had not anticipated was that I would also shift and that I would outgrow that particular job and role and would want something else.
Yeah.
And it sort of has nagged me so much that I didn't anticipate that that would happen. And I think it is inevitable that that happens. But why are we not? I'm sort of baffled by why I was surprised by that.
No, totally. And I think that's a great question. And part of it is how I think we historically have talked about career in particular, right? So historically, you get a job, you have that job, you retire from that job, end of story, right? And we thought even, from a psychological point of view, until maybe the last 20 years, we thought of kind of development happens through adolescence, which ends in your teenage years. We actually now know that the frontal lobe continues to develop and grow into your mid and even late 20s. And then guess what? There's a whole nother period of brain change and growth and expansion when you become a parent, whether or not you're the birthing parent, right? So
Right.
and then, guess what? It changes again when you hit perimenopause as a woman, right? Like, our brains are constantly changing, and we're only really in recent times understanding that. And anytime we have brain changes or go through a transition, our values and our
Yeah.
needs might shift, and our career can and should reflect that. But I don't think that's the story we had for the vast majority of kind of human existence. And we're in this really exciting, but sometimes scary period of like constant evolution and recognizing that careers can change and shift over our lives many times over.
Yeah, we're talking much more openly now than we even did 3, 4, 5 years ago about menopause and perimenopause and the impact on the brain and how the brain changes in women. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this. I wasn't even thinking about it, but I feel like we should probably talk about it because the majority of my audience are women that fall within either right on the cusp of perimenopause or maybe like right where I am in menopause. And the shift in our brains and how that impacts our ambition, our career goals, sort of how we think about all these things. Can you give us some perspective on what you're seeing and maybe advice that you're giving to patients as they enter into this particular phase in life?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, probably far more women are in perimenopause than they even realize, right? Like,
That's right.
if you are in your late 30s, chances are you are actually entering into some type of perimenopause period, right? And then that extends all the way through. And so there's like almost a 20-year period if you kind of lump women as a whole in women's lives when they are potentially in this space. And there
Mhm.
are massive hormonal shifts, and we recognize that in teenagers. So I have teenagers in my house, right? And their hormones are all over the map, and it can be a little bit of a wild ride. Guess what? I'm going through the same thing, right? Of up and down, because what happens is it's not this slow and steady decline. It is the same as the teenage years of up and down and all over the place as your body adjusts to a different reality.
Mhm.
One funny, I guess, example of that in in terms of the hormonal place is that you have less estrogen. You actually have less of oxytocin sometimes too, which is that bonding hormone. And I have been reading some interesting stuff around how that impacts women in terms of that people pleasing element and like
Interesting.
the desire for connection, right? That you get into these later
Uh-huh.
perimenopause and the menopause years and you start to say, I'm good. Like I'm going to do my own thing. And I think we've talked about the 40s as being the years where you're like, screw it, I don't care anymore. But I think that's right now we have maybe some hormonal understanding of why some of us start accessing that later in our lives.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredibly fascinating. I never even thought about that, but that is a really fascinating example. You mentioned the fact that you are in a house full of teenagers. Now, you're the mom of
Yes.
four, I
Yeah.
believe. And are those boys, girls? What's the breakdown?
Both. I have a 9-year-old daughter and then sons that are 11, 13, and 15. So we are
Amazing.
in a different, I mean, I still have visceral memories of what they were like, of the toddler years when I joke that I lived in a preschool for a long time. And that's very, very like close to my heart. And now we're in a different period. But I think the thing about parenting is they always need you. It looks different. It's not as physically challenging in those tween and teen years, but it's still the emotional and cognitive load of it doesn't go away. That's all still very much there.
Yeah, maybe Anne, talk a bit about. I can only imagine how challenging it was to be doing what you were doing with four, basically. Your children were toddlers as you were sort of coming up in the workforce. So maybe talk a little bit about how you encountered that, maybe how that changed and shifted your work and your focus.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I should say, now I work full time, but I did not when they were little. So I started out working full time and I, like you, had my dream job. I was at
Mhm.
Harvard. I was a psychologist working there. That's what I kind of had been aiming for and felt really lucky to have that position. And I had my second kid and I just kind of hit a wall. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it, right? I think that's the narrative we have that moms can't do it. I could. I didn't like who I was in doing it. And I didn't like
Mhm.
how I was showing up for my kids and my patients, right? Because I couldn't do either the way I wanted to. And that's when I started to say, maybe something has to shift here in my life, and through conversations with my spouse. And I was really lucky that he was in a place where he carried the benefits, and so I was able to say, let me take a pause, let me think about something else. And that's when I opened my own practice instead and could work fewer hours. But there very much was this period of growing my business over then 10 years as I grew my family and kind of doing both. And I got real good at boundaries very fast because that was the only way to make both work. But it certainly was challenging at different points. And I think now, my kids are a little older. And so I am able to kind of pivot one more time and lean in and do some more public facing work. And again, shift what I want now that I have a different type of bandwidth available, right? And so before I really wanted work to be boundaried so I could play with my kids and have that experience, but continue to have the intellectual connection that I love through my work. And now, sometimes my kids and I are working in like parallel play, like they're writing papers and I'm sitting at the table also writing, and it's this shared but different experience.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. You talk a lot about the importance of really leveraging the value of motherhood. So in your case, you were able to create a sort of dialed back existence because of the nature of of your work. And that is oftentimes possible. In some careers,
Capacity.
it is much more difficult to ultimately do that. But I guess one question that I have for you was, did you plan for that, or how did you sort of how did you think about the process of, okay, I'm going to dial back for the next X years, then I'm going to lean back in, or did you just say, okay, right now I'm going to dial back?
No, no, I
Okay.
totally understand your question, and it's a great one. And the answer is I did not plan for it at all. I was going to work full time. So my mom was a doctor. And she worked full time and had 4 kids. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. That doesn't look so hard. She's got it. And I think I loved my work, and I'd put a lot of time and effort in. I joke that I spent a lot of money on my brain and wanting to use it in this very specific way. I didn't go into the field because it was mom friendly. I went into it because I loved it. And I thought it was really interesting. And it was a huge shift for me to think about pulling back emotionally. And I had very little models. This was in the not the early 2000s, in like around 2011 was when I started my own practice. And I think now we have a lot more discussion of this idea of career pauses. There's this great new book, if anyone is interested in reading more about it, called The Power Pause by Neha Rush. And she is brilliant and like a great advocate for the power of taking a break. I didn't have that book, right? I just did it and was like, I'm going to figure this out a little bit as I go along. And that's actually the entirety of my career has now been figuring it out as I go along and kind of saying, hey, maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll try that. But I will say I did try to stay in the workforce in that more traditional setting. And I asked to go part-time. I went to my supervisor and I said, I'd prefer to go part-time. I'd do 80 hours. I could do a job share. Here's another clinician who's also having a baby, would love to do a job share. Here's how it would work. Came up with all of these solutions. And the response was essentially, there are 500 other people who are waiting for your job.
Wow.
And so it was kind of like, we can't do that. It's logistically complicated. We don't do part-time. That's just not a thing here. And I was like, okay, that's what spurred me to leave. So my preference in some ways would have been to stay. Now, again, the story has a happy ending, right? It led me to this incredibly enriching, more multifaceted career that I would never have imagined for myself. But that wasn't what I wanted at the time. And who knows how that would have played out in a different direction. But yeah, definitely not planned and not sought after.
Yeah. Okay, so incredibly fascinating. So I want to pivot and talk a bit about another dimension for the woman who's listening, mother who's listening, who decides to completely separate, maybe from the workforce, take a pause, take a separation. Yeah. How can she leverage the experiences that she's having that most likely are different than the ones that she was having when she was working, so that if and when she decides to go back to the workforce, which a lot of people decide to do after taking a 5 or even 10-year break to raise their kids, how can they leverage and actually be maybe more proactive about thinking about, how can I take the skills that I am gaining as a mom and as a caretaker and really leverage those differently?
Yeah. So, I think that's the story we have out there, is that motherhood is this break somehow, that it's we don't do anything. We're just sitting around. And so the first thing I tell women is to get really clear understanding of all of the skills that you are learning during this period, right? Again, back to your brain is actually going through the most significant period of growth that it has other than adolescence in terms of the changing circuitry. And that I talk about the 5 P's of leadership skills that we gain during the postpartum period. And one of those is people skills, right? So empathy, being able to read emotions, right? Emotional IQ expansion, right? These are things that we really seek out in leadership and are hard to teach. And you were just growing in them by nature of parenting small humans, right? Another one is processing skills, things like decisiveness, prioritization, right? You become a parent and you start drinking through the fire hose in terms of learning new skills, and you've got to process a lot of information and act on it very quickly. Guess what? That's also what leadership has to do. Productivity is another set of skills that you gain. So, there's that old adage, if you want something done, give it to a working mother, because you have no spare time. You have to just get stuff done, and you can be ruthless in your prioritization because of that. Again, huge leadership skill. perspective taking and planning, right? As a parent, you're constantly trying to multitask and hold both the big picture developmentally for your kids and what they need, and also all of the small steps to get there, right? Like if anyone's taking their kid to the beach, you know, your big picture is, I want to take my kids to the beach and have a fun day. The little stuff is, do I have the sunscreen, the snacks, when's nap time, what's the weather, how are we going to get there, how am I going to carry all the crap to the beach, and oh right, I have to make sure my children don't drown or eat too much sand while we're there, right? And then the last one is playfulness. And that's the one that people don't talk a lot about, but I did some research on playfulness back in my grad school day, and I find it fascinating. It's this unkind of sung hero of strategic thinking, of creativity, of problem solving. So again, all of these skills are things that you are growing in leaps and bounds without even trying. And they're all transferable skills to the workplace. So once you get clear on that, there can be some more confidence in how you show up in interviews. And then beyond that, right, network, right? Mothers are good at connecting overall. And one of the things that I think is lovely about motherhood is the way that it does give us these shared community spaces at times. And there's no reason you can't start to use that as a way to find your way back to the workforce and connect with other people. There's also now a lot of job boards that are focused on mothers, right? Mom Up is one, and there's also 5 Hour Workday. I think that one's based in UK, but there's a couple out there, and they're basically organizations that are really focused on getting moms hired, right? So that there's kind of, whether it's a returnship program or just companies that say like, hey, we get it. We see all of those skills you built and we want you to come work for us. So there's a lot more resources these days out there than there used to be around returning to work too.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it. Do you have any kind of a maybe advice for how to capture or how to track those motherhood skills that you're going to leverage back into the workforce? Is it, I mean, my guess is it could be something as simple as making a list. I often talk about in my podcast the importance of having a skills checklist, something that you can remind yourself of all the things that you know how to do as a confidence boost. Go back and read that, can make you feel really good about everything that you're learning and how you're growing. Is that kind of the process that you would use, or is there some other maybe tool that you recommend for somebody to kind of help create awareness, first of all, and then keep track of those skills that she's growing?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer to almost all things is whatever works for you, right? The thing that's going to work the best is the thing that you can be consistent with and engage with. So if you are someone that wants to write a resume blurb on your motherhood years and that resonates, do that. If you're someone that wants to have a notes app on your phone and you can just come up with little examples while you're on the go, do that, right? Do the thing that fits for you. But if you're struggling to come up with that list, a couple things. One is ask your friends, right? What would you say that I am doing? Get them to brainstorm with you. Sometimes we get blocked, or describe them, right? But to use a peer where we get out of our own way a little bit, right? That self-critic shows up loudly sometimes when we're trying to boost ourselves. And so a way to work around that is to somehow engage with someone else, either mentally engaging with them or actually asking them to help you do that. The other thing I would say is, and again, in that category of connection is like, if you are on a pause, keep a toe in the door. Not even a whole foot, right? But like a toe. And I don't mean that you have to keep working, but keep in touch with your network really loosely. Stay on LinkedIn if that's how, right? Like whatever it is you want to do, shoot them an email, have coffee if you can. Get a Zoom chat in, send them an article. If you can just even keep those really loose connections, then you have them already built. And if you didn't do that, start small. Take teeny tiny steps to rebuild those connections and see what's out there.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's interesting, as you were just describing getting the feedback, I wrote a blog post a couple of weeks ago about using AI to boost your confidence and doing just what you're talking about. Like you can, so of
Yeah.
course, ask your network, but you can also feed into AI all the things that you're doing, maybe a copy of your resume and some background, and say, okay, give me an analysis of my skills. What is it that I'm really good at? And see what it spits back out at you. And it can be an
Yeah.
amazing tool for just reassuring yourself of all that learning and growth that you intellectually that this is happening. At the
Yes.
same time, as you said, you can get kind of caught in the muck and the voice in your head and all the things. So that can be sort of an interesting way of, or at least another tool potentially that you could use for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, right? I think um, anytime we can get a little bit more objective, and obviously AI is a tool where what we put in is what we get out, but it again, it kind of short circuits that self-critic a little bit so that it can't get in the way, and then can take in what you're able to take in as in return.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I know you also talk about, and we haven't touched on this in this conversation, the sort of vernacular about ladder versus maybe a web. And it's interesting. There's a new McKinsey book that's coming out called The Broken Rung, which again uses
Mhm.
that ladder analogy. And I have one of the authors, I think there's three authors, one of the authors who's going to be coming on in a few weeks to talk about that. But maybe talk a little bit about why you think it's kind of helpful to not necessarily think of it as a ladder as we have historically, but instead to think about it in maybe a way that is either a web or a sphere, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think traditionally we think of career and just ambition in general as up or out,
Hmm.
right? I mean, a law firm is like a classic model of this,
Yep.
right? You climb the ranks to partner or you leave, and leaving is a failure, right? That's the unspoken part of that. So your only choice to call yourself ambitious is to climb the corporate ladder up, 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 up. And I don't think that's how ambition works, right? I think ambition is, like you said, a web or a sphere. Pick the analogy that resonates more for you. But it's this idea that ambition goes in every single different
Hmm.
direction. It's not just up, because the up model means that the only thing that we can be ambitious for is either power, title, or money,
Right,
right?
right.
Those are the only options. However, we can be ambitious for time. We can be ambitious for connection, for creativity, for autonomy, for space. Um, it's not that those other three things can't be out there, but you can get power or title or money in a nonlinear way. And all of these other things are part of ambition too,
Yeah.
right? Ambition just means, what am I seeking and growing towards? And that growth goes in all sorts of different directions. And you can change that over time. And so when we start to shift from this linear trajectory to one that allows a lot more space, the pressure is off. We don't have to see our worth as caught up in our title at work or our salary. And then we're free to feel a little bit more aligned, right? And actually go back to that question we started with of like, what do I actually want?
And that is absolutely brilliant. I guarantee you there are lots of people listening to this who will not have thought about ambition in that really broad way that you just described. I absolutely love it. I am so excited for your book. I hope you will come back once it is
Thank
published.
you.
We would be happy to have you back. In the meantime, would you mind telling folks where they can find you?
Yeah, I would love to. So, first of all, I hang out on LinkedIn all the time, Dr. Anne Welsh at LinkedIn. And you can message me there or read what I'm posting. I talk about the book process and working motherhood a lot. They can also find me on my website, which is just drannewelsh.com. And you can learn more about my coaching for working mothers, my executive coaching for women, and my corporate consulting work as well.
Anne, thank you so much. It was great to meet you. I'm so happy that you were here. Wishing you all the best with the book.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Good, thanks. Wow, friend, I don't know about you, but I could talk to Dr. Anne Welsh for hours. There is something that is so deeply validating about her concept of reframing ambition as more of an expansive web rather than just this very narrow ladder and climb upward. I really loved that, and I hope you did too. I keep thinking about that moment when Anne said, we can be ambitious for time, we can be ambitious for connection, we can be ambitious for creativity and for autonomy, right? That really just hit me right in the heart. How many of us have felt guilty for wanting those things as opposed to just the next promotion, or have felt guilty for wanting to spend time with our kids while also still wanting to achieve things in our career? It is really hard to balance all of that, and I thought Anne's framing of this was just really, really incredible. So, friend, I am genuinely curious. What part of this conversation sparked something in you today? Did you have an aha moment, maybe about your own ambition paradox? Or maybe did you recognize some of the leadership skills that you've developed through motherhood that you hadn't given yourself credit for, maybe hadn't even thought about? I would love to hear from you. So be sure to shoot me a direct message. You'll find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Laura Cox Kaplan. Or of course, you can drop us an email at info.shesaid.media. Your stories are what makes this community so rich, and quite honestly, they are often the inspiration for future episodes. So please keep them coming. And if you happen to find yourself nodding along or feeling really seen in this conversation, I would love it if you would take 30 seconds and leave us a quick review. Those reviews are like gold. They help other women just like you find these conversations when they need them most. Plus, I may be guilty of reading them when I need a little boost. I'm just being honest here. Anyway, friend, until next week, remember what Anne said about that 1 degree shift. Sometimes even the smallest change in direction can completely transform your journey. You've got this, and I'm going to be right here cheering you on. Until next week, remember, She Said Podcast is a weekly production of She Said Media. I'll see you next time.